Welcome to Apostolic Bible College's Christian Counseling, Ministry 403, Lesson 1. What is Christian counseling? By the time you finish this lesson, you will be able to correctly define counseling, humanism, and theism, and recognize the distinction between Christian counseling and biblical counseling. In preparation for this lesson, you should read your textbook, Christian Counseling, Chapter 1. First, let's discuss what counseling is not. Counseling is not the role of the apostle, prophet, evangelist, or teacher. It falls firmly in the role of the pastor or other professional whose training and burden are counseling. The technical definition is professional guidance in resolving personal conflicts and emotional problems. Everyone engages in some form of counseling regularly. This might be in the form of parents guiding children, employers supporting employees, friends giving advice to each other. In a broader sense, your text brings out a working definition for this course, which includes some of the tools you will be using in counseling. Counseling is a conversation where one party with questions, problems, and trouble seeks assistance from someone they believe has answers, solutions, and help. This course will introduce you to tools appropriate for many situations that will make you a better counselor. The foundations of our modern understanding of psychology come from three primary sources. First, the Greek philosopher Plato from the 5th and 4th centuries BCE established the theory of the psyche or soul, in which he divided it into three interconnected parts: the rational intellectual reason or logistikon, the passionate emotional spirit or thumos, and the desiring appetite-seeking physical pleasure and gratification or epithematikon. He proposed that psychological health depends on the rational part of the soul governing the other two. And his ideas laid the groundwork for later psychological concepts like mental health and the unconscious. A person's character was determined by which part is dominant. Second is Aristotle, another Greek philosopher from the 4th century CE, considered a founder of psychology for his comprehensive study of the psyche. He proposed that the soul was not just the mind, but the very principle that structures and animates all living things. The human soul was superior over the souls of plants and animals because of its unique capacity for reason. Finally, we have René Descartes from the 17th century, who, unlike Aristotle, who argued against the idea that the soul and body are separate, allowed for the separation of the mind from the body, allowing for the study of consciousness and of the mind separate from the body. He is famous for the phrase cogito ergo sum, or I think, therefore I am. Kant from the 19th and 20th centuries, is considered one of the fathers of modern psychology. He opened the first laboratory devoted to psychological studies, establishing psychology as a legitimate science. He viewed psychology as a scientific study of conscious experience, and he believed that the goal of psychology was to identify components of consciousness and how those components combined to result in our conscious experience. Finally, also from the 19th and 20th centuries, we move to Sigmund Freud, known as the father of psychoanalysis. His theories include that of the unconscious mind, that the mind is a reservoir of thoughts, memories, and emotions that lie outside the awareness of the conscious mind. Another theory was his psychosexual theory, which states 5 stages of human development: oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. These psychosexual stages capture the main growth points of a person from infancy to adulthood and focus on different facets of wants, needs, and desires. His clinical work emphasized dream analysis and verbal or talk therapy, something we're going to be spending a lot of time mastering in this course. Endeavoring to master Christian counseling, we must understand the difference between 2 philosophies. The development of modern psychology has one serious major flaw. Its theories and practices conclude that all the answers we are to find are within man, and God is excluded. This philosophy is dominant in modern psychology. We call this humanism. As a counter to humanism is theism, which acknowledges the existence of God, that He has created both the body, spirit, and soul of a person, and has intimate knowledge of the workings of humanity. Theism is the foundation of our Christian counseling approach and depends on divine guidance and the impact of spiritual dimensions. We also draw a finer distinction. There is a common designation of biblical counseling. Your text points out that biblical counselors believe that every answer to every problem can be found exclusively in the pages of the Bible, and that modern science has little to contribute to the practice of counseling. While it may seem very similar, Christian counseling takes a broader approach, acknowledging that modern science does have something to offer to our counseling practice. While our counseling is firmly established in Christian and biblical standards, the science of psychology can help us better understand why people think, feel, and act in a certain manner. Please note that this is a Christian counseling class and that we rely heavily on all the tools available to us, the Word of God, as well as the reality of modern psychological science, in order to bring about a healing of the body, soul, and spirit. In the field of biblical counseling, foremost is Dr. J. Adams, dubbed as the father of biblical counseling. He published one of the principal texts of this practice, Competent to Counsel, in 1970, beginning the modern movement of Bible-based counseling. We will hear more about him later. Also important names to know are Dr. James Dobson and Dr. Kevin Leman, both associated with the conservative organization Focus on the Family, and Dr. Tim Clinton, president of the American Association of Christian Counselors. Text mentions several cautions to potential counselors. Please don't let these hinder a potentially vital part of your ministry as a pastor, teacher, deacon, or servant saint of God. We mention these so that you don't become discouraged. One of my favorite cartoons as a child, and I'm showing my age here, was Super Chicken and his sidekick, Fred. When faced with something potentially unsafe, Super Chicken would say, "You know the job was dangerous when you took it, Fred." Paul warns us to put on the whole armor of God. Let's suit up and boot up. The first key word is beware. You will face trying circumstances that will test your resolve to help others. Be prepared for personal challenges. You may begin to hear of trauma you have yet to even imagine. Each time you meet someone, they will teach you something new about themselves that you should learn for yourself. For this reason, be prepared and temper your own reactions to manage the private knowledge about people you know and to navigate potential awkwardness in those relationships. Counseling can be very hard emotionally, but this is tempered by the joy you will find in helping others find healing and draw closer to God. I'd like you to pause this presentation and read John 11, 1 through 44, the story of the death and resurrection of Lazarus, the friend of Jesus. There are two key points I'd like you to take away from this story. Both of these are instructions from Jesus to those present. Understanding these points requires us to know that burials at this time and place were perhaps different than your culture. There was no embalming of the dead body, so burial typically happened the same day. The body is washed, anointed with oil, wrapped in a linen shroud, and carried to a tomb carved into rock, where the body is allowed to decompose. Later, the bones would be collected and placed in an ossuary for a second burial. The carved space would be sealed with a large stone to prevent contamination. The first lesson here is found in verse 39, when Jesus commands them to take away the stone. He did not do this himself, but asked others to do so. They participated and facilitated the miracle, the resurrection. I can imagine Jesus commanding Lazarus to come out only to be blocked by the stone. The second happens after Jesus commands Lazarus to come forth. He climbs and wiggles out of the entrance. Remember, his hands and feet are still wrapped in strips of linen. Not being able to see, since his face is still covered with a cloth, Jesus could have commanded the stone to be gone. He could have commanded the grave clothes to fall away, but he didn't. There is an important application we can learn from this. We're going to be working with people who need to be set free from their tombs and from their grave clothes. It is important work. It is often hard, messy, and stinky work. The stones could be doubt, unforgiveness, anger, resentment, or addiction. They may be spiritually alive, but their grave clothes still bind them and need to be removed, strip by strip, so that they may enjoy the freedom of new life. This, my friends, is the role of the counselor. There is a scriptural principle best described in Psalm 37, 23 through 24, that the Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in him. Though he may stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. If we truly believe this principle, then we must believe that in his omniscience, he knows when I sit and when I rise, that he perceives my thoughts from afar, that he discerns my going out and my lying down, that he is familiar with all my ways, that our lives are firmly fixed in the spiritual realm, and that the thing that comes against us is spiritual, be it physical or emotional. A crisis in life will almost always generate a crisis in faith. As a crisis in faith emerges, we will hear common questions for which we need to be prepared. Where is God? Why does he allow this to happen? Why didn't he prevent this? What about the Bible's promises? Effective counseling requires depth, understanding, and biblical wisdom. We will give you a series of case studies and exercises that you must work through in order to show that you can apply the principles you will learn to hypothetical situations. Next class, read Christian Counseling, Chapter 2.